Well, good morning. Wayne Cody here. It's June the 23rd, 2009. And we're going to do this in little sections because there's a few things that concern me, some questions that I'm going to be asking of the Supreme Court and probably the Human Rights Commission. And I want to read this part here. This is Your Guide to the Canadian Charter Rights and Freedoms Special Edition. It's a little booklet to give you a rough outline, but I'm going to read this part here. Why is it important that the Charter is part of the Constitution? The Constitution is the supreme law of Canada. Imagine that, the supreme law of Canada. Generally speaking, all other laws must be consistent with the rules set out in the Constitution. If they are not, they may not be valid. Since the Charter is part of the Constitution, laws that limit Charter rights may be invalid. This makes the Charter the most important law we have in Canada. It is important to point out, however, that the Charter itself allows governments to put some limits on Charter rights. Section 1 of the Charter says that other laws may limit the rights and freedoms in the Charter so long as those laws are reasonable and justified in a free and democratic society where we live. Free and democratic society. So a law that limits a charter right is nevertheless valid if it conforms with Section 1. The fact that the Charter is part of the Constitution also means that governments must try to make sure that new laws are consistent with it. For example, the Federal Department of Justice must make sure that new laws proposed by federal governments comply with the Charter. How long has the Charter been in force? The Charter came into effect on April the 17th, 1982. It was part of a package of reforms contained in a law called the Constitution Act, 1982. One section of the Charter, Section 15, came into effect only on April the 17th, 1985, 3 years after the rest of the Charter. This delay gave governments time to bring their laws into line with equality rights in Section 15. So basically, the Charter is the supreme law in Canada. All other provinces must at least have consideration for the Charter when they're writing laws that protect the equality rights of its citizens in each province. The part that I am going to target is Section 195 of the Workmen's Compensation Act here in Nova Scotia. In Section 195 of the Compensation Act here in Nova Scotia empowers the medical community when doing an assessment on an injured worker to write anything in the reports and their assessments that cannot be challenged by that injured worker in a court of law. In other words, the doctor can say anything, or the nurse can say anything, or a physiotherapist can say anything, and their word is the final word, even if it destroys the life of that injured worker. That's what Section 195 does in the Nova Scotia Act. Section 167 empowers the staff of the Workmen's Compensation Board to do pretty much the same thing. In other words, a caseworker at the Workmen's Compensation Board could say, Wayne Cody called the office, he was abusive, he was nasty, and he threatened me. Therefore, we are no longer going to communicate with him, and they hang the phone up and blah, blah, blah. Even though I did not, I have no right, no way to challenge that. Now, imagine that you are a consumer of insurance, house insurance, and the insurance company who you pay your money to has that same kind of power. That they can say anything they want to deny you of the right, legal right, to compensation for your home insurance. Let's say your house burnt. But in the case of that insurance company, you can take them to court and challenge them. If a doctor assesses me as a private citizen and causes harm to me because of his medical suggestions, I can take him to court and challenge him and sue him for malpractice. But under the Workmen's Compensation Act here in Nova Scotia, I lose that right that every other citizen has. So that my equality rights aren't being protected. So the Charter is not being respected, nor is it anywhere being close to being respected by the workmen's compensation legislation here in the province of Nova Scotia. I would probably say if you were to go across Canada, the consistency of the workmen's compensation legislation is not consistent, and that it's abusing their clients as well in other provinces differently, maybe, and maybe in the same form. I'm concerned with the one here in Nova Scotia right now. So I don't know how the legal community here and the Nova Scotia Barrister Society can sit back knowing, they know that this is going on. I don't know how the government, the legislators, the elected politicians can sit back and let this happen. I don't know how the Supreme Court of Canada can let this happen. I don't know why the Supreme Court of Canada can't have a tribunal looking into this, the workmen's compensation legislation across Canada, legislation across Canada in provinces, to make sure that it is aligned with and to line up with the Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Why is the Supreme Court sitting back and basically letting this happen? I have written Chief Justice Audrey McLaughlin. Now I know that she never ever saw my letter because some gopher grabbed it and tore it up and threw it in the garbage. But that was one of my questions to Chief Justice McLaughlin. I have written the human rights in the province. I have written the human rights in Canada. They ignore it. So that tells me that this country is no better than Iran. And it really isn't. Because if I organized injured workers and we went out and took to the streets and started protesting en masse downtown Halifax, what's stopping the police from coming in and macing us? If we're acting out against our government the way our government's abusing us. Yes, the citizens in Iran are probably being abused by their government. But here in Canada, right under the umbrella of the Charter of Rights and Freedom, the Canadian Constitution, the supreme law, Canadian citizens are not being treated as equal partners in this country the minute they become injured. Unions should be ashamed of themselves for upholding such a nasty law. They know about it. The NDP here have they're associated with the Nova Scotia Government Employees Union. The Nova Scotia Government Employees Union profess to be there to protect their people. They have a labor law firm, Pink, Breen and Larkin. Why aren't Pink, Breen and Larkin challenging this law? Good questions. I want to know why. We're going to continue on this little booklet, and hopefully someday we'll get something out of it. Have a good day.